It was just an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, or so it seemed. The sun was high in the sky, casting a warm, golden glow over everything. Sarah, my daughter, had just wrapped up her college classes for the day. She was headed to work, her part-time job as a cashier at a local grocery store. Nothing unusual about that, and nothing unusual about the route she took either. She had been driving this path for months now, every day, without incident. But little did she know, today would not be like any other day. She left the house at her usual time, the soft hum of her old car's engine accompanying the sound of her favorite playlist. The moment felt serene, so much so that she didn't notice the white van parked just a few spaces down from her car. In the grand scheme of things, it was an unremarkable van. The kind you see every day on the roads, with its slightly faded paint and dirty windows. But it was about to become the catalyst for something no one saw coming. Sarah had been at the grocery store for about 2 weeks, working her shifts between her classes. She loved the job because it allowed her some independence and helped her save money for her college tuition. She was passionate about studying psychology, hoping one day to help others the way she had been helped in the past. But like many students, her schedule was tight, and she often found herself juggling work and studies. As Sarah walked toward her car, mentally preparing herself for another shift, she noticed something strange. There was a woman standing next to her car, someone she hadn't seen before. At first, Sarah thought it was just another customer, but as she drew closer, she realized the woman wasn't shopping. She was standing too close to Sarah's car, almost as if she was waiting for her. The woman wore a wide-brimmed hat, which cast a shadow over her face, but the way she stood, with her hands on her hips, radiated an air of authority that made Sarah pause. The woman's demeanor was sharp and unapproachable, and as Sarah approached her car, she noticed that the woman's gaze was fixed on her as if she were scrutinizing every step Sarah took. This made Sarah uneasy, but she continued walking. It wasn't uncommon for people to have disagreements over parking, especially in crowded areas like this. Sarah had gotten a few complaints from people about the way she parked before, but she always tried to be considerate. She wasn't in the habit of taking up too much space or blocking anyone. "Excuse me," the woman suddenly called out, her voice cutting through the quiet afternoon air. Sarah turned, surprised. "Yes? Is there a problem?" she asked, hoping it was just a simple misunderstanding. "You've parked wrong," the woman replied, her tone accusatory and demanding. "I've been watching you. Your car is way too close to the line. You're taking up space that's meant for someone else." Sarah blinked, processing the woman's words. She glanced at her car and, to her surprise, noticed that it was indeed close to the line. She hadn't meant to park in such a way, but it was nothing extreme. The parking lot was busy, and she had parked as best as she could in the available space. "I'm sorry," Sarah said, offering an apologetic smile. "I'll move it right now." But the woman didn't respond with the usual understanding or kindness one might expect in such a situation. Instead, she stepped forward, blocking Sarah's path. "No, you're not going anywhere," she said firmly. Her words sent a chill down Sarah's spine. There was something cold and threatening in her tone, something that made Sarah's heart rate quicken. Sarah took a small step back, trying to make sense of what was happening. "Excuse me, I'm really sorry." "I'll move it," she repeated, trying to remain calm. But the woman didn't let her pass. In fact, she took another step forward, now standing so close that Sarah could feel the tension radiating off her. "Get in the van," the woman said suddenly, her voice dropping to a low, almost menacing whisper. Sarah froze. Was this some sort of joke? Was this woman playing some twisted game? Before Sarah could even react, the woman lunged toward her, grabbing her arm with surprising strength. "What the hell?" Sarah shouted, but the woman didn't let go. With an almost mechanical force, she shoved Sarah toward the van, which had been parked only a few feet away from where they were standing. "Get in the van now," the woman barked, her grip tightening on Sarah's arm. For a moment, Sarah thought of resisting, but she realized that there was no one around to help. The parking lot was nearly empty, save for a few cars in the distance, and the few people who were there had their heads down, too busy with their own errands to notice what was happening. What are you doing?" Sarah cried out, struggling to free herself, but it was no use. The woman shoved her into the van with such force that Sarah stumbled, her heart pounding in her chest. Before she knew it, the van door was slammed shut behind her, trapping her inside. The woman got into the van's driver's seat, slamming her door shut with a loud bang. "This is for your own good," she muttered, her voice steady and cold. Sarah could hardly breathe. The van's engine roared to life, and before she knew it, they were speeding down the street, Sarah's mind racing. "Let me out," she demanded, banging on the window, but the woman didn't respond. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest, and she realized the gravity of the situation. This wasn't some random woman with a complaint about parking. This was something far worse. As the van sped through the streets, Sarah began to panic, the world outside blurring as the woman took a sharp turn and headed down an unfamiliar road. In that moment, Sarah had no idea who this woman was or what she wanted from her. But she did know one thing for sure. Her life was about to change in a way she never could have imagined. The van sped through the city streets, its tires screeching as it made sharp turns that jerked Sarah's body against the cold metal interior. She pressed her face against the window, her eyes desperately scanning the passing streets, trying to find something familiar, anything that could signal she was still in control of her own life. But the buildings, the streets, the signs, they all blurred together into an indistinct mess of urban chaos. Nothing felt real anymore. The woman at the wheel was unfazed. Her hands gripped the steering wheel with a steady determination, as if she was in complete control, her eyes focused ahead, never once glancing at Sarah. The silence between them was suffocating. Sarah's mind raced, and her heart pounded in her chest. Was she being kidnapped? What did this woman want? Was this some sort of sick joke? Her thoughts bounced between fear and confusion. "Where are you taking me?" Sarah demanded, her voice trembling. "What do you want from me?" The woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she kept driving, her face a mask of indifference. Sarah tried to push open the door, but it was locked. Panic surged in her chest as she realized she was trapped physically and mentally. The reality of her situation was starting to sink in. She had no control over where she was headed, no say in what was happening. "I said, what do you want from me?" Sarah repeated, her voice now edged with anger. She wasn't going to let fear take control. She couldn't. She needed to know what was happening and why this woman had targeted her. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of silence, the woman spoke. Her voice was calm, almost chilling in its composure. "You've been causing problems," she said, her words cutting through the air. "Parking your car all over the place, taking up spaces that belong to other people. You don't respect the rules, do you?" Sarah blinked, trying to make sense of what she was hearing. "You're mad about a parking spot? That's why you're doing this?" she asked, incredulous. The woman's lips curled into a thin, emotionless line, her eyes still locked on the road ahead. "It's not just about the parking," she said cryptically. "It's about respect. It's about learning your place." Sarah's mind was reeling. This couldn't be real. She had seen this woman for all of 5 minutes before the nightmare had begun. She had apologized for the minor mistake in parking, and yet here she was trapped in this van headed God knew where. "Please, just let me go," Sarah begged, her voice cracking. "I don't even know who you are. I don't know what this is about." But the woman remained silent, her grip on the wheel tightening. Sarah was starting to feel the full weight of her isolation. There was no one to help her. No one knew where she was. Her phone, which she had left in the car, was out of reach. It felt as though the world had forgotten her. As the van rumbled on, Sarah noticed a sign up ahead that read Downtown Industrial District. They were heading into a part of town that was secluded, the buildings old and run down, their windows boarded up. It was a place Sarah had only passed through on her way to work, a place that seemed abandoned, nothing like the bustling, lively area she usually worked in. "Where are we going?" Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper now. She had no choice but to ask again, desperate for any information. "Don't worry about it," the woman finally replied, her words cold. "You'll understand soon enough. The van pulled into a parking lot behind a decrepit warehouse. The place was empty, except for a few rusted cars and trucks parked haphazardly around the lot. The sound of the van's engine humming to a stop felt like a death knell in Sarah's ears. The woman turned off the ignition and finally looked over at Sarah, her eyes hard and unfeeling. "This is where you learn your lesson," she said. Sarah had no idea what that meant, but she could feel the blood rushing to her ears, her pulse pounding in her chest. Her stomach churned, a mixture of fear and confusion bubbling up inside her. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. The woman got out of the van without saying another word, slamming the door behind her. For a moment, Sarah just sat there, staring at the empty parking lot, her hands trembling in her lap. She was trapped, there was no escape. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to run, to fight, to do anything but sit here, but she knew it was pointless. She was alone, with no one to help her. With a deep breath, Sarah forced herself to calm down. There had to be a way out of this. There had to be a way to make the woman understand that she wasn't some kind of criminal. She was just a college student trying to survive. This didn't make sense. She couldn't let it end like this. As Sarah hesitated for a moment, trying to figure out her next move, the van door swung open again and the woman reappeared. She was holding a phone in her hand, and she was dialing something on it. "You gonna call my boss, aren't you?" Sarah asked, suddenly aware of the woman's intentions. "You're going to tell them that I did something terrible so I can lose my job?" The woman didn't respond, but the coldness in her gaze told Sarah everything she needed to know. This was more than just a power trip, it was personal. The woman had some kind of vendetta against her. And now, it seemed like she was about to follow through with it. Before Sarah could say another word, the woman finished dialing, pressed the phone to her ear, and waited for the line to pick up. Sarah watched in horror as the woman started speaking, her voice low and confident, clearly trying to make sure that everything was going according to plan. "I think we've got a problem," the woman said, her voice muffled but distinct. "The girl in the parking lot? She's about to cause some major trouble for your store. You might want to handle this quickly before it gets out of hand." The realization hit Sarah like a freight train. The woman was making sure she lost her job. The whole reason Sarah was in this mess was because of a petty dispute over parking, a mistake she had already apologized for. But to this woman, it was far more than just a mistake. To her, it was a personal attack. Sarah felt her stomach sink. This was it. The woman was going to destroy her life, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. As Sarah sat there, watching the woman make that call, her heart raced. Every passing second felt like a lifetime. The sensation of helplessness gripped her. And no matter how much she tried to reason with herself, she couldn't make sense of the cruelty that was unfolding before her. The woman's cold, calculated actions spoke volumes. This wasn't just some misunderstanding. This wasn't an impulsive act of anger over a parking mistake. This was deliberate. This was personal. The woman finished her call and hung up, turning her attention back to Sarah. The same cold expression remained plastered on her face as she stared at Sarah, almost as if she were a mere inconvenience, something to be dealt with in passing. She didn't seem the least bit concerned about what Sarah might be feeling. In fact, she seemed almost entirely indifferent to the destruction she was causing. For Sarah, the reality of her situation was starting to sink in. This woman had trapped her, manipulated the situation to her advantage, and now she was going to take everything from her, her job, her dignity, her sense of safety. And the most infuriating part was how little the woman seemed to care. To her, Sarah was just another casualty in her self-righteous crusade to impose her distorted sense of justice on the world. Sarah couldn't hold back her frustration anymore. Her fists clenched, and she took a deep breath before speaking, her voice trembling but filled with determination. "Why are you doing this? What have I done to you? I don't even know you. Why do you hate me so much?" The woman looked at her, her gaze unwavering. There was no apology in her eyes, no flicker of guilt. It was as if Sarah's questions didn't even register in her mind. "You've done nothing to me personally," the woman replied flatly, her tone lacking any emotion. But people like you don't follow the rules. You think you're above everyone else. You think you can do whatever you want without consequences. I'm just teaching you a lesson." Sarah stared at her in disbelief. The absurdity of the situation, the complete lack of empathy from the woman, was overwhelming. The words the woman spoke felt like a punch to the gut. "A lesson," Sarah repeated, struggling to grasp the gravity of what she was hearing. "This isn't a lesson. This is just pure cruelty." The woman gave a single nod, as if acknowledging the validity of Sarah's words, but showing no real emotion in return. "Maybe it's cruelty in your eyes," she said coolly, "but in the grand scheme of things, you'll see that it's necessary. People need to learn respect. People need to understand their place." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. What did she mean by understand their place? She was a student. She worked hard at her part-time job to make ends meet. She was doing everything right. This woman, this stranger, was taking all of that from her over something so trivial. Parking. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for parking wrong. I didn't mean to. I will never do it again," Sarah said, her voice breaking with frustration. "Please just let me go. I don't deserve this." The woman's lips curled into a slight, almost imperceptible smile. "You think saying sorry is going to fix everything? That's what people like you always do, apologize, make excuses. It's too late for that now." Sarah recoiled at the woman's words. It was like a slap to the face, a reminder of how powerless she truly was in this situation. She was fighting for something as basic as her right to be heard, to be seen as more than a mistake to be erased. But the woman wasn't listening. The indifference in her eyes was like a wall Sarah couldn't break through. As the minutes passed, Sarah's mind raced. She knew she had to do something, but what? She had no idea where they were, and her phone was still in her car, long out of reach. The woman had complete control over her fate, and every word she spoke reinforced that power imbalance. Sarah began to feel small, insignificant, trapped in a world that felt overwhelmingly hostile. "I'll lose my job, won't I?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's what you want, isn't it? You're doing all of this just to get me fired." The woman's gaze didn't falter. "Yes," she answered simply, her voice as cold as ever. "You need to learn that actions have consequences. You can't just keep doing whatever you want without paying for it. It's time for you to face the reality of your actions." Sarah could hardly believe what she was hearing. This was more than just a lesson in parking. This was an attempt to break her spirit, to force her into submission, to teach her that her voice didn't matter. It didn't matter that she was just a young woman trying to make her way in the world. All that mattered to this woman was the idea that Sarah had stepped out of line, and now she had to be punished. For a moment, Sarah didn't know what to do. The silence between them was deafening. Every breath felt like a battle, every thought a struggle against the overwhelming tide of fear and helplessness threatening to consume her. She thought about her family, her dreams, her future, and how quickly all of it could be torn apart by a single person who believed she was entitled to dictate what was right and wrong. But as Sarah sat there, defeated and lost in the weight of her emotions, something inside her stirred. She couldn't let this woman win. She couldn't let her take everything from her without a fight. No matter how small, no matter how powerless she felt, she had to find a way to resist. She had to hold on to something, anything, that could remind her she still had control over her life. "I won't let you do this to me," Sarah said, her voice stronger now. "I'll fight this. I'll tell my boss what you've done. I'll tell them the truth." The woman's lips twitched, as if she were amused by Sarah's resolve. "Do you really think anyone will believe you?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "After everything you've done, after the mess you've caused, who do you think will listen to you?" Sarah looked the woman squarely in the eyes. "I don't care what you think. I know what you're doing is wrong, and I'll make sure you're held accountable." The woman leaned back in her seat, her arms folded across her chest. She was no longer focused on Sarah. She was looking out the van window, as if she had already moved past the moment. It was as though Sarah's words had no power over her. And yet, Sarah knew something deep inside her had changed. She had found her voice again. The fight wasn't over yet. Sarah's words hung in the air like a defiant challenge, but the woman in the driver's seat didn't react. For a moment, it seemed as though the tension between them had dissipated. The woman simply stared ahead, her gaze locked onto the worn road. But Sarah, although trembling inside, could feel a flicker of hope. The woman might have all the power right now, but Sarah hadn't lost everything. Not yet. It was then that Sarah noticed something strange. The woman's phone, which she had used earlier to call Sarah's manager, was resting on the passenger seat. For a split second, Sarah considered the possibility of making a move. Could she grab the phone? Could she somehow contact someone for help? Her mind raced, but fear kept her paralyzed. What if the woman noticed her attempt? What if it made the situation worse? As she sat frozen, staring at the phone, the woman finally spoke, her voice as cold as ice. "You're wasting your time. No one will believe you." The words pierced through Sarah's thoughts like a dagger. "You're just a girl, trying to make it in a world that doesn't care about people like you. Your boss? He'll be too busy to even listen." Sarah's heart sank. She hadn't thought about it that way. She had always been the diligent, obedient worker, the kind of person who believed that honesty and hard work were the keys to getting ahead. But in this moment, that belief felt fragile. In a world where people like this woman could crush someone's future without hesitation, who would be there to stop it? The woman continued, her words casual but cutting. "You think you have a future? I've seen hundreds like you. They all come and go. People are nothing more than pawns in a game. One wrong move, and your world comes crashing down." Sarah's mind raced. "So, this is about power. You just want to prove you're in control," she said, the realization dawning on her. "You're not teaching me anything. You're just hurting me because you can." The woman's lips curled upward, but it wasn't a smile. It was something more sinister, almost as if she were pleased by the fact that Sarah had finally figured it out. "That's right," she said, "and you're not the first person to think they can outsmart the system. But you'll learn the hard way, just like the others. You'll learn that the world isn't fair. No one cares about your petty excuses, and once you fall, no one will come to your rescue." Sarah's breath hitched, but something deep inside her hardened. She was scared, terrified even, but she wasn't about to let this woman strip her of everything she had worked for. There had to be a way out of this. There had to be a way to fight back. Just as she opened her mouth to respond, something unexpected happened. The woman's phone buzzed. A text message popped up on the screen. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't make out the words from her angle, but the alert was clear. It was from her boss, Mr. Thompson. At first, Sarah froze, unsure of what to do. Should she try to grab the phone? Should she risk angering the woman even more? But then a strange thought hit her. What if this was the opportunity she had been waiting for? What if this text could be the opening she needed to turn the tide in her favor? The woman, still looking ahead, didn't seem to notice the phone vibrating. Sarah's pulse quickened. This might be her only chance. In one swift motion, she reached for the phone, her fingers brushing the screen. She quickly unlocked it, her heart racing. She didn't have time to read everything, but the message from Mr. Thompson was enough to make her blood run cold. It wasn't just a simple, "How are you doing?" or "Are you coming in for your shift?" It was an order. "We've made a decision. You're fired. We can't afford the disruption." Sarah's stomach dropped. The woman had already gotten to him. She had already done exactly what she set out to do, destroy Sarah's livelihood. But Sarah wasn't going to let this be the end of her story. Not yet. In that moment, everything seemed to click. The woman wasn't just a random stranger trying to teach a lesson. She had orchestrated this entire thing. She had worked behind the scenes, manipulating the situation, contacting Sarah's boss, and ensuring that Sarah would be cast aside without hesitation. This was personal, far beyond a simple parking dispute. But Sarah had one card left to play. Her fingers flew over the phone's keyboard, and before the woman could notice, Sarah typed a quick message to Mr. Thompson. "Please, don't let her do this. I am not the person she's making me out to be. This is a mistake. I need my job." Sarah hit send just as the woman turned her gaze toward her. What did you just do? She demanded, her voice sharp with sudden anger. I sent him a message, Sarah replied, her voice steady, despite the fear creeping in. I won't let you ruin my life like this. You can't just make decisions for me. The woman's face darkened, and she reached for the phone, but Sarah yanked it out of her reach. Don't touch it, she said, her voice rising. I won't let you control me any longer. The woman's eyes narrowed, but instead of the wrath Sarah expected, she seemed to be considering something. The silence stretched between them, thick and tense. Sarah couldn't read the woman's expression. There was no sign of emotion, no indication of whether her plan was faltering. But one thing was certain. Sarah had finally managed to break the silence. For the first time, the woman seemed unsure, like something had shifted in the balance of power between them. Sarah had taken a stand, and it was enough to throw her off balance. It was then that the woman's phone buzzed again. This time, her eyes flashed to it, and she snatched it up quickly. She read the message, her lips curling into a smile that was neither kind nor reassuring. You're wasting your time, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. The decision is made. But Sarah wasn't finished. She had taken back some control, and she wouldn't stop until she had her life back. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as the woman read the message from her phone, her eyes scanning the words before narrowing into a sharp, calculating gaze. Sarah couldn't help wonder what was running through her mind. Was she planning to escalate this situation even further, or had the power shift started to rattle her? She couldn't afford to wait and see. She had to push forward, no matter how uncertain the outcome was. The woman's smile twisted as she put the phone back on the passenger seat and turned her full attention to Sarah. You think a simple message will change anything? She said, her voice almost mocking. The damage is done. Your job is gone. You won't be getting it back. You'll have to find another way to survive. Despite the cold, dismissive tone in her voice, there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Sarah could feel it, a subtle shift. This woman, who had seemed so in control earlier, was showing signs of losing her grip. You don't get it, do you? Sarah said, her voice now calm and resolute, though her insides were still trembling. You've already lost. You've played all your cards, and you've shown me exactly what kind of person you are. I don't need to prove anything to you. I know who I am, and I'm not letting you take that away from me. The woman's lip curled, her gaze hardening as she leaned in, her tone dripping with disdain. You don't know anything about power, do you? You think I'm doing this for fun? For what? A petty grievance over a parking space? Sarah sat back in her seat, breathing slowly. She could feel her pulse steadying, a surge of clarity coming over her. This was bigger than she initially thought. The woman wasn't just some angry stranger with a vendetta. There was something else at play, something personal. You've been planning this for a while, haven't you? Sarah asked, her voice quiet but firm. This isn't about parking. This is about something more. Something deeper. The woman's face twitched, and for the first time, Sarah saw a crack in her otherwise stoic demeanor. A fleeting moment of vulnerability flickered in her eyes before she quickly masked it with a cold stare. You don't know anything about me, the woman snapped, but there was a tremor in her voice now, betraying a deeper truth. You're right, Sarah replied, leaning forward, her gaze unwavering. But I know what you've done. You've manipulated this whole situation to destroy my life. And I can't just let you get away with it. The woman looked away, her expression hardening again as she stared out the windshield. She was avoiding Sarah's gaze, but Sarah could feel the tension in the air. The woman was hiding something. That brief moment of uncertainty had shown Sarah that there was more to the story than she had first thought. This wasn't just about a power trip or a lesson in parking. There was something personal at the core of the woman's actions. After a long silence, the woman spoke again, her voice much quieter than before. You think you figured it out? That you're some kind of victim? Well, let me tell you something. People like you always think they're victims. But the truth is, you've never had to fight for anything in your life. You've never had to sacrifice. You don't know what it's like to lose everything. The woman's words were laced with bitterness and regret, but they didn't make sense to Sarah. She was still trying to piece together what the woman was saying, the veiled references to loss and sacrifice. There was a pain in the woman's voice that Sarah hadn't expected. Was this really about Sarah, or was the woman projecting her own struggles and anger onto her? "You're wrong," Sarah said, her voice steady but full of conviction. "I've worked hard for everything I have. I've never taken anything for granted. I've sacrificed, too, just like everyone else. But that doesn't give you the right to tear my life apart." For the first time, the woman didn't respond immediately. Her eyes flitted to the rearview mirror, and for a brief moment, Sarah saw a flicker of something like regret, but also fear. Fear of being exposed, perhaps. Fear that Sarah was getting too close to the truth. "You don't know me," the woman said, her voice barely a whisper now. "You don't know what it's like to be in my shoes. To have everything you worked for taken away in an instant." Sarah's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of the woman's words. Was she speaking from experience? Had she lost something or someone that made her view the world so coldly? Sarah didn't know, but the realization hit her like a hammer. This woman wasn't acting out of pure malice. There was a deep, personal pain driving her actions. The silence between them stretched on, thick with unspoken words. Sarah knew she had to press further. "I'm sorry for what you've been through," she said quietly, the words coming more naturally than she expected. "But that doesn't justify what you've done to me." The woman's gaze snapped back to Sarah, her eyes hard and sharp. For a brief moment, Sarah thought the woman might lash out, but instead, she took a deep breath, her shoulders sagging as if the weight of everything had suddenly become too much to bear. "Sometimes people do things they can't take back," the woman muttered, more to herself than to Sarah. "And once it's done, there's no undoing it." The words hung in the air, and Sarah felt a sense of unease settle in her chest. This wasn't just about parking. This wasn't just about a petty grudge. This was a woman who had lived through something that had broken her, twisted her sense of right and wrong, and pushed her to hurt others in order to regain some sense of control. But the sad truth was, this woman had taken her pain and tried to inflict it on someone else. And Sarah had become the target. The woman didn't say anything else, and Sarah sat in silence, watching her as she stared ahead, lost in her own thoughts. Sarah could feel her own resolve strengthening. No matter how much this woman tried to destroy her, no matter how much she tried to tear Sarah's world apart, Sarah wouldn't let it happen. She had been knocked down, but she wouldn't stay down. As the silence between Sarah and the woman lingered, a new kind of clarity washed over her. The woman's confession, the crack in her facade, wasn't a sign of weakness, but rather a reminder that everyone has a story, a backstory that drives their actions. However, Sarah wasn't about to let herself be defined by someone else's brokenness. She couldn't let this woman's bitterness dictate the rest of her life. The van remained parked in that isolated lot, and the tension inside was palpable. But Sarah knew one thing for certain now. She couldn't just sit back and let this nightmare unfold. She had a future to fight for, and she wasn't going to let a stranger ruin that for her. She had to take control. Her thoughts snapped to her father. He was a federal judge, someone who wielded significant authority in the legal system. Sarah had always known her father's work was important, but it wasn't until now, in the face of this injustice, that she truly understood the power he held. She hadn't planned on involving him. She tried to keep things in her own hands, believing she could fix it herself. But she realized now that this woman's actions reached beyond her own world. This was bigger than just a parking issue. It was a matter of justice, and it was time to bring in the big guns. Sarah glanced at the woman, still sitting stiffly behind the wheel, seemingly lost in her thoughts. Her fingers were still tightly gripping the steering wheel, her eyes distant. For a moment, Sarah considered keeping quiet, playing it cool, and trying to figure out her next move. But the time for playing nice was over. She had a life to reclaim. "I'm done," Sarah said suddenly, her voice unwavering as she turned to face the woman. "I'm done with you, and I'm done with this." The woman's eyes flicked to Sarah, her expression unreadable. "Done with what exactly?" she asked in a mocking tone. I'm done sitting in silence, waiting for you to destroy me, Sarah said, her voice stronger now. I'm done being your victim. I have a father who has the power to bring you down, and he will. The woman's eyebrows shot up in surprise. For the first time since Sarah had met her, there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes, a hint of fear. She quickly masked it, but it was too late. The seed had been planted. You think your father will do something about this? The woman scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. You think you can just wave a magic wand and make everything right? Sarah's pulse quickened, but she didn't back down. I'm not talking about magic. I'm talking about real power. My father is a judge, a federal judge, and I'm going to make sure that your actions are exposed for what they are. The woman stared at her for a moment, her expression hardening again. She didn't speak for several long moments, and Sarah could feel the weight of the silence pressing in on her. Would the woman call her bluff? Would she still try to twist the situation in her favor? Finally, the woman broke the silence, her voice calm, but there was a crack in it now, a vulnerability that Sarah had never heard before. You think you can take me down just because of who your father is? I don't need to take you down, Sarah replied, her tone cold. The truth will take care of that. You've made a mess of everything. You've tried to ruin my life, and I won't let you get away with it. The woman's face twisted into a grimace. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Oh, I know exactly who I'm dealing with, Sarah shot back. You're someone who is hiding behind power, hiding behind manipulation, but you're not invincible. No one is. For the first time, the woman looked away, her eyes darting to the dashboard as if she were considering something deeply. Sarah could feel the shift, the moment where the woman realized she had lost control. The idea of facing someone with real authority, someone who could expose her actions, was finally starting to sink in. Sarah's phone buzzed from her pocket, and she quickly fished it out, already knowing who it was. It was the text from her boss, Mr. Thompson, who had received Sarah's last message. He had responded, and Sarah's heart raced as she unlocked her phone to read it. Sarah, I'm sorry. I didn't know the full story. I've already called HR and explained everything. You still have your job, but I will be taking immediate action with the woman involved. Please stay safe. Sarah exhaled, relief flooding through her body. She had won, not through brute force or empty threats, but by standing up for herself and ensuring the truth was heard. The woman had failed to break her, and now it was her turn to face the consequences. With a newfound sense of strength, Sarah turned to the woman, who was now staring out the windshield, her face unreadable. I'm done with this. You've lost. You can't break me. The woman didn't answer. She simply sat there, her shoulders slumped, her once confident stance now deflated. Sarah opened the door of the van and stepped out, her legs shaky but firm beneath her. She wasn't the same person who had been shoved into this van hours ago. She had fought back and she had won. As she walked toward her car, the weight of everything that had happened over the past few hours began to sink in. The fear, the helplessness, and the anger, it was all still there, but now it was replaced with something stronger. A sense of victory, a sense of power. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be fallout from the woman's actions, and there would be consequences. But Sarah had learned something important today. No matter how dark things seemed, no matter how much power someone had over you, the truth and determination would always win in the end. And she had the strength to keep moving forward no matter what. As she got into her car and started the engine, she glanced back at the woman one last time. She didn't need to say anything. The battle had been fought and won, and now it was time to move on. With her head held high, Sarah drove away from that dark parking lot, knowing she had taken the first step in reclaiming her future. If you've ever felt powerless or like the world is working against you, know that you're not alone. No matter how dark the situation gets, there's always a way to fight back. Stay strong, trust in yourself, and never let anyone take away your voice. For more powerful stories like Sarah's and to join a community that fights for justice, subscribe to the HOA Stories. Follow our journey, and let's expose the truth together. Stay tuned, and remember, your story matters.